Hello everybody, season's greetings. It's really been a wonderful year despite a few things that happened most recently, but apart from that it's been a very pleasant and enjoyable year. A lot of great opportunities and a lot of fun. The most important thing I'd really like to talk about is the fact that I've decided to put together this channel, and hopefully if you're watching, you will subscribe and let your friends know and let your acquaintances know that there is this new channel, and hopefully it will provide you the kind of material that you're looking for. So my biggest suggestion to you would be to put some comments down below. Let me know what you want me to produce, what you want to see. I don't want to do the same old product reviews and unboxings. I think enough people do that. My real purpose is to discuss and talk about photography, to show you some things that you may not otherwise be aware of, to also give you an opportunity to have me not necessarily critique your images, but really to help you enhance or improve what you may already have photographed, and just to give you an opportunity to spend some time discussing your images via this medium. So with that, this particular episode really is some of my images from 2019, the places that I went to, and I don't want to ramble on. Really, the first part of the year was spent in Florida with the Space Coast Birding Festival, then Austin, Texas with the launch of the S1 series of cameras. Subsequent to that, the Nampa Summit, and I went down to Death Valley to do a little bit of photography there, and then came back to Las Vegas for WPPI. Once that was done, we're kind of now into the latter part of February, where I went to the F3C conference, and barely got back and packed up and off to Vietnam. And that's where the episode really starts, with the first image from Vietnam. And then I'm going to do a second video with some of my 2019 nature and wildlife images, which hopefully should be out within a week. And then, based upon your suggestions, I'll create more content. So with that, thank you for watching, and hope you enjoy. After getting back from Fort Myers, the next trip in pretty quick succession was to Vietnam. This was more of a vacation, just me and my wife. We decided that Vietnam was worth exploring. She had been there a few times before. I had never been there, and I was pleasantly surprised. The location is absolutely gorgeous. I would recommend that to anybody, particularly if you're into street photography and also some urban and suburban landscapes. It's really very interesting. One of the things that I noticed is that every city has its own little character and its own color scheme. This one is more based on the yellows. I, in fact, did a blog post entitled it "The Yellow Walls." So this one, for me, I found it inordinately interesting. The sheer yellow of the upper part of the wall, and then the textured lower portion below the ridge. And to me, that was just a contrast which made for a very interesting composition. Then, of course, the white bicycle added another dimension to this image. And more interestingly, I found that there's a lock on the front wheel, and I'm not quite sure what that lock would do if somebody did, in fact, want to just pick up the bike and steal it. But anyway, barring aside that, there's one other element that I found interesting, and I noticed it after I had taken the image, and it's these three little green leaves that are poking out from the right-hand side, the lower right, if you can see between the downspout and the window. Right below that, you can see those 3 green leaves, which adds a little bit of a color element, and I found that added to the composition, particularly the way the 3 elements triangulate both in shape as well as in size. So with that, head on to my next location, which was Oklahoma City, and that was the beginning of April, and then on to St. Augustine. So Oklahoma City, there wasn't really much to photograph there. The Photographic Society of America, of which I was a board member, was having their meeting, so it was something that I was obligated to go and participate in. And once that was over, the next event, which is an annual event held at St. Augustine in Florida, and it's called the Florida Birding and Photo Fest. It's a 3-4 day event, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's a lot of fun. Photographing all the birds at the alligator farm, and then other events which are on the beach, photographing horses, other landscapes, and other photo walks in the old city, which is just one of the most beautiful cities in Florida. In fact, one of the prettiest cities in the country. So I'd actually joined in with this group early morning, and we kind of got there before sunrise. The skies were just gorgeous, the colors were phenomenal, and to have these horses and riders gallop across the incoming tide was just really beautiful. Fortunately, I was lucky. My S1 had arrived, and with the 3 lenses, the 50 f1.4, the 24 to 105 f4, and the 70 to 200 f4. So it was a lot of fun shooting with that system. Takes a little bit of getting used to. I was pretty fresh at the product. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the event, and this is an image that is representative of what we were able to capture on that trip. So between the trip to St. Augustine and then a session in Seattle, Washington, I actually spent about 12 days in Ohio at another birding festival, and this is called the Biggest Week in Birding. It's basically at the Maggie Marsh and Black Swamps in Ohio. The migration of the warblers is really the essence of this particular festival. There's literally thousands of people who come through there. Many of them camp overnight, and the boardwalks are constantly just mobbed with people. Trying to get some photographs is not the easiest thing to do. We do hold some workshops, but they are typically meant to be held off of the boardwalk, not on the boardwalk. But anyway, that was a lot of fun, and hopefully I get to do that again this year. But from there, I went to Seattle, Washington to do a program at one of the Panasonic dealers. And it was a lot of fun, but it gave me an opportunity then to take a few days off and drive to the Palouse region. Now, it's a bit of a long, boring drive. There's nothing to really see or do. You drive for 5.5 hours. But once you get into the Palouse, it's absolutely gorgeous. The wheat fields that have been tended to, seeded this time of year, some of them have started growing, so you get to see the greens. And I drove up to Steptoe Butte on this occasion to try and get a image of the sunset and the undulation with the shadows and the light. The weather was not the best, but fortunately around about 8 o'clock the sky started opening while the sun was setting, and the light hit these hills just perfectly. I have had this image printed on Hanemule's new metallic rag, and it came out just gorgeous. Even though I say it, I just love this image. So this is now the next morning. Got up early, well before sunrise, and actually drove up to Steptoe Butte in the dark, set up, and was hoping for some good light. Once again, I mean, the clouds were pretty thick, and I wasn't sure whether there was going to be any light. But fortunately, as the sun started coming up, there were a few openings in the clouds, and the light started streaming on the hills, just made for another gorgeous image. So the month of June, basically, I took a trip to St. Louis to do a program at another dealer. And then for the 4th of July weekend, I went to a friend's place in Martha's Vineyard. And this image is of the Pogue Lighthouse. We were able to get in. She had access to the place, and I was able to capture this. Once again, this was with the S1R and the 24 to 105, placed very, very low on the floor, looking up at the staircase that takes you up to the upper section where the light is. So this was, clearly one of those images that suited the portrait format, and that's how I've decided to present it. And hopefully I'll be able to get back there again and do some more, because it is very, very artistic in how the stairs are created and what you can capture. My wife and I love going down to Maine, or actually going up to Maine, and the coastline is just something that is exceptional in Acadia National Park. The other elements that I love doing is doing a lot of night photography. So on this particular trip, I sort of stopped at this location, and the image is actually a composite of 3 images, all of them taken exactly from the same location, with the same shutter speed, same settings as far as exposure is concerned. The waves broke in different ways, and this image was combined with the rock formations being left as they are, but 3 different wave breaks that took place. One on the upper section of the image and 2 in the lower section. The composite has worked well, in my opinion. The detail in the rocks are just exceptional. And once again, I say that I'm just loving using the S1R and the amount of data it can capture and the amount of resolution and detail I can get out of it. So this image is also in Acadia National Park, taken from the Loop Road. Fundamentally, my objectives here was to see how the S1 would perform at high ISO, long exposures, and I think it was really very good. I mean, I just am impressed. The amount of detail I was able to capture is exceptional, and the quality of the pixels and the quality of the amount of noise is most acceptable as far as I'm concerned. This image has not been really processed. It's been cropped, but minimal processing, and that's about it. So August, I made a quick trip to Baltimore, Maryland, more for a personal trip. And then, you know, it's always the time when Labor Day approaches and summer starts winding down. We went down to Falmouth. It was absolutely gorgeous. You know, still a few people on the beach. But this particular old pier really attracted my attention. And we shot quite a few images, and then as the moon started coming up, the light on the water was just absolutely gorgeous, and I couldn't sort of plan on just leaving without seeing what else the light would do. The direction where the moon was rising wasn't perfectly aligned, but I decided to compose this image such that I would get a 50-50 of the beautiful warm tones with the cool blues of the water. And this is what one was able to capture. Well, the last week of September was this year's PSA conference over in Spokane, Washington. My second trip to Washington this year, and once again the Palouse is most attractive any time of year. The harvest is done, the fields are pretty much barren, some amount of tilling is going on in certain areas. They do a bit of burning, but I went up to Steptoe Butte this afternoon hoping to catch some good light, and there wasn't much at all. And then a storm rolled in, and this was really interesting, the way the clouds were forming, and just became gorgeous and yet ominous in every way. And this was the image that I was able to get with all the storm clouds. And I was hoping that I would still be able to get a sunset with the way these clouds were, and hope there'd be some reflected light back on the fields. And I think it was worth waiting, as you will see in the next image. So it was absolutely amazing. As the sun was dipping down over the horizon, the sky just lit up in this brilliant yellows, oranges, and reds, and all of that light was reflecting right back down onto the fields. Now, given the fact that I'm sort of pointing my camera directly at the sun, the undulations are not that obvious because of the way the light's falling pretty much perpendicular to the direction of the plane of my camera. So you don't see that much as far as shadow and light is concerned, but just the colors are being reflected in the fields. Now, if the fields had been green, as they were in the spring, I don't think one would have noticed this, and it wouldn't have been so impactful. But here's the result of what I call waiting and a little bit of patience. So on the last day of the conference, I took a few friends and we drove around, went to a couple of places, and then finally ended up in Idaho. And that's where I was aware of this particular barn and actually had photographed this barn in the spring, trying to get the Milky Way in the background, and that was most interesting. But this image, for some reason or another, I just found inordinately attractive. The way the hay bales were, the actual positioning of the barn itself, and then the vastness in the background. And the only little green that you see is in the field where the hay bales are, and the rest is all totally brown. But it gave me the impression of being very painterly, and I just had to capture it. So after the PSA conference, I was fortunate to have been invited by Panasonic to test out some lenses that they had developed. And I went to Tanzania and spent some time there on safari. And that was a lot of fun. Now, images from that particular trip are in my second set that I will be posting in a few days. But this was an image that I wanted to put into this collection purely because I find it most appealing. The soft palette and the very smooth, soft, curvaceous lines. It was on a day when we'd had some early snow and there was really no point going out. So I set up on my dining table a lensball and then put this flower, held it with a platypod and a gooseneck and a clothespin to keep the flower in place, and then put some lights again on some platypods and goosenecks to create the right lighting structure, and shot this with a macro configuration, and I just found it beautiful, and I wanted to include it in this collection of my favorite images from 2019. If you do want more information about how this image was created, I have a blog post and you're most welcome to go and have a look there. I have the image of the complete setup with the platypods and the goosenecks and the lights, etc. So please go to my blog if you are interested in finding out more. And by the same token, please, if you find that the material there is interesting, do sign up to be notified. So you'll get an email each time I post something on my blog. So I hope you enjoyed some of the images and a little bit of the backstory behind them. The next set that you will see in a week or so will be some of the nature and wildlife images with quite a few from my trip to Tanzania. But, stay tuned. Do please subscribe. And if there is that notification bell, just click on that so you do get notified of when the next and subsequent episodes are produced. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.